In case you haven't noticed, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo.
Today, we're gonna be talking weird books. What is a weird book? Throughout the years on my channel, I have frequently described books as being weird. It got so weird. Weird. But what exactly does that mean? I feel like when it comes to weird books, there's not one way to define them. It's kind of one of those things where it's just a vibe. It's just this feeling that it gives you. Weirdness can expand genres. It can expand age ranges. It can be a lot of different things, but I do feel like there's a couple commonalities for me that make a book weird. Number one is that all weird books just have this sense of being unsettling. They're not overtly disturbing. It's more of this subtle underlying discomfort that it makes the reader feel. Often they will end in ways that feel unresolved or leave a bunch of unanswered questions or very little explanation to the things that happen. They can often feel like one big fever dream. But the one main common thing that I found with weird books is that they're very divisive. For almost all of these books that I'm about to recommend, if you go on Goodreads, they're gonna have a very low average rating because people either love them or they hate them, and there's really no neutral feelings to them. So I'm gonna be recommending you my favorite weird books. Some of these books lean more like lit fic weird, other ones lean more horror weird, but they are all, in fact, very weird. If you want a fun drinking game, drink every time I say the word weird, and you will black out by the end of this video. Just to get it out of the way, probably one of the most recognizable weird books is Bunny by Mona Awad. This one is very weird, very much written like fever dream. You don't know what's real, you don't know what's not. It's very odd. Following this woman in an MFA program, and she meets this group of women who are part of this thing called the Smut Salon. They all refer to each other as Bunny, and it's kind of just all about her being pulled into this kind of strange little club, little cult that they have going on. What's real, what's not, what's happening. This is the first book of this kind of category that I ever read many years ago, and it kind of set me on this path of discovering all of these other very weird books. Next up, I have A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. This is a fiction book, but it's written in the style of a memoir following this female serial killer who had a very strong appetite for her victims. She has been incarcerated, she's in prison for life, and she's writing the story of her life. And I loved this book. The main character has such a strong voice, and listening to her tell her life story is just so interesting, and I often kept forgetting that it's not a real memoir and that she's not a real person who was actually convicted for eating people. Love Dorothy Daniels, my favorite cannibal killer. Next up, I have a short story collection. These are all like sci-fi leaning short stories. Every single one is quite possibly one of the weirdest things I've ever read. Each story gets weirder than the last. If you like Black Mirror, you would like this. It kind of has that sci-fi meets technology, very strange eeriness in every single story. One of my favorite stories in here is following a bunch of people in a hospital where they have this disease where their bones start spontaneously melting. Another story in here that I loved is one about women who go on dating apps to meet men who turn out to be these things called blots, which are artificially created men intent on stealing the identities of the people that they're dating. It's so strange. I loved it. This is one of my favorite, if not my top favorite short story collections ever. The next book is a very short one, and that is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. Because it's so short, there's not a ton that I want to say about it, but it follows this woman who is married to her husband who is perfect. They live in a perfect community. They have perfect friends. Their life is perfect. Everything is perfect, but is it? The direction that the story took was definitely not one that I was expecting, and when I started putting the pieces together of what was going on, I was shocked. It is a very fun, very quick read. It's only 80 pages, so this is one that you can definitely read in like one sitting and just have it rattle your mind. The next book definitely takes the cake for weirdness, and that is The Book of the Most Precious Substance by Sarah Gran. So in this book, we're following our main character who is a rare books dealer, and she gets a client who tells her, there's this book that I want you to find and I will pay you like any price to get my hands on this book. So she starts asking around, asking her connections about this book, trying to locate it, trying to find it. And in that, she discovers that the book that she's trying to acquire is a very old, ancient book of sex, magic, and rituals, where it is kind of foretold that the person who completes all of these rituals will be granted anything that they want, anything that their heart desires. And each of the rituals involves sexual related practices to unlock all these different seals. So as she's kind of going on this like quest to find the book, she is performing these rituals, and then eventually, in order to complete the rituals, she must produce the most precious substance, which, let's just say, in order to produce this most precious substance, you need to make a splash. And it was just wild. It was really wild. I love this book so much. The ending was chef's kiss. Next up, I have Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. This one's definitely a book about obsession. It takes place in this like little French village following this woman who is the wife to the town's bread maker, and this new couple moves into town and she just becomes obsessed with the wife and with them as a couple. She cannot stop thinking about them. They are running through her mind 24/7. So part of the books you're following them meeting and interacting, and then the other parts, there are letters after the fact that she is writing to the wife. I really enjoyed this. It is quite possibly one of the horniest non-romance books I have ever read. Girl was down bad. If you love very heavy like lit fic obsession stories, you will enjoy that. Another one that I would say is like a lit ficky obsession book is My Husband by Maud Ventura. This one is following a woman who is obsessed with her husband. She thinks her husband is the greatest thing in the entire world, more so than her children. There's literally a part in this book where she goes, if my kids died, I would be fine. If my husband ever left me, I would cease to exist. She obsessed with her husband, but she has this little thing where she likes to meticulously plan out every interaction that they have so that it's perfect and amazing, but every once in a while she likes to test him. She likes to give him little tests, and if he doesn't pass them, she secretly punishes him. And these punishments just get bigger and bigger and bigger and start ramping up. She realizes this time she might have gone too far. And then the ending of this book was not what I expected in the best way. I loved the end. The next one is actually the only young adult book that I have on here, but it is by far the weirdest young adult book that I've ever read, and that is You Must Not Miss by Katrina Leno. This one is a book about revenge. We're following our main character who has been treated very badly by the students in her school, by her friends, by guys. So in order to kind of escape all of the trauma that she has endured, she starts writing about this fictional world, and as she's writing about it, she escapes in her mind to this world, but she discovers very quickly that things she does in this fictional world have real life ramifications, and she uses this to her advantage to get revenge. It is so weird. It went in places I never expected it to, and I also just love this cover. This cover, ugh, obsessed. Speaking of 10 out of 10 covers, Women Eating by Claire Coda. This is a book about a woman who's a vampire, and she had a very toxic relationship with her mother and has finally, for the first time, escaped her mom and is living on her own, but she's really struggling figuring out how to supply blood for herself. This book really, I've always said, it technically is a vampire story, but it's more about a woman's struggle with food and eating disorders, so definitely trigger warning for that. But the descriptions of how she's struggling with meals is just so interesting, and I think it's so fascinating to see that topic done through the lens of a vampire. This is one of my favorite books. I loved it. It's one of those books that's kind of like no plot, all vibes, and this very sinister undertone. The next one I have is The Murders of Molly Southbourne by Today Thompson. This is another very short one, and we're following a girl named Molly who every time she bleeds, a clone of her is created hell-bent on killing her. So anytime she gets a nosebleed, anytime she gets like cut and bleeds, her period, she then has to prepare herself for an attack by a clone version of herself. It's very weird. It goes in wild, crazy directions. I love clone books, and this is probably one of my favorite ones that I've read. It was done so well. And again, it's another really, really quick one that you can read in like an afternoon. The next one I have is another vampire book, and that is Thirst. This one is a sapphic vampire story following these two women. One of them is a vampire whose entire clan and family was taken out, and she's now surviving on her own. And then in present day Buenos Aires, the other main character is touring these catacombs and sees this mysterious figure of this woman who is very captivating to her. And then after that starts feeling like she's being watched everywhere she goes. And it's about how these two stories and these two women across centuries come together. I loved this. I feel like this was very much giving Carmilla vibes, and especially like the first half of this book where you're following the vampire through Europe in the 1800s. I loved her journey and her storyline. And again, just another cover that is beautiful. I love how bright the pink and the red is. And then lastly, we have probably one of my favorite books that I've read this year, and it was such a surprise. That is The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. This one is following two characters. One of them is a mermaid who has had her tongue cut out, and the other is a non-binary plague doctor. Basically, they're in an apocalypse because the mermaid's daughters have eaten everybody in the kingdom. They got a little hungry, they got a little snacky, they ate everybody, so now it's an apocalypse. The mermaid and the plague doctor meet and they have a little connection, and so they go on a journey, and through their journey they come across this very creepy cult with all of these children and these three surgeons who call themselves gods. It is so weird. I do think maybe like on the realm of weirdness, if there's like a scale, this is all the way, she's over there, she's weird. I loved it. I loved it. Oh my god, the romance. There's romance that I was obsessed with. The world is so interesting. The plot is crazy. The characters that we meet are so strange. And it's crazy to me how this is just barely 100 pages. And there was just so much going on that I love. This was great. Loved it. 5 stars, 10 out of 10. Honestly, like most of these were 5 stars, but this is definitely my favorite of them all. Then I have a few that for me weren't like my favorites. I gave all of these around 3 stars, but if you really love weird books and you're looking for even more recommendations, I would still recommend them because I do think a lot of people enjoy them. My Sister the Serial Killer. This one is about a woman whose sister always kills her boyfriends. Then she starts dating the guy that the main character is in love with. So she's trying to decide how to protect her sister but also protect this guy. Big Swiss, which is about this woman who transcribes sex therapy appointments and becomes obsessed with one of the women who's a client that she's transcribing the sessions from. Our Wives Under the Sea, which is about a married couple where one of them has just returned from a deep sea mission in a submarine, and her wife is now realizing that she has changed, something happened to her under there. And then The Vegetarian, which is about this woman who, after having a dream, is convinced that she needs to stop eating meat, and how that decision has impacted every aspect of her life in very strange ways. So those were all ones that I enjoyed, but they're not like favorites. And then I have a bunch that are still on my TBR that I'm really excited to read. So I'm just gonna run through these very, very quickly. Perfume, The Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind. This one is about a serial killer who makes perfumes out of his victims. In the House in the Dark of the Woods by Laird Hunt, which I believe is about witches in the forest. The Memory Theater by Karen Tidbeck. This one I believe has something to do with a magical portal and these two children who go into this other world. Follow Me to the Ground by Sue Rainsford. This one is about a woman who falls in love with a man. There's something wrong with him and she doesn't know if she can cure it. All's Well by Mona Awad. This one is following a Shakespeare theater troupe. Boy Parts, which is about a woman who is a photographer who takes explicit photos of average looking men and becomes obsessed with some of them. Chlorine by Jade Song, which is about a teen girl who is a professional swimmer and has a very strong desire to be a mermaid. And then briefly, A Delicious Life, which is about a woman who falls in love with a ghost. So those are all ones that are on my TBR at the moment, but please let me know in the comments if you have any other weird book recommendations for me, because I feel like these books are the kind that are kind of hard to find because you don't really know if a book is going to actually be weird until you read it, because it is all just the vibe and how did it make you feel. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe and check out my Patreon where I post tons of exclusive content. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!